The air was different when Ethan woke up the next morning. He wasn't in his own bed. The walls surrounding him were wooden, aged, and peeling. His head throbbed as he pushed himself up, his fingers brushing against the cold, dusty floor. The realization hit him hard. He was still in Ravenshade. The others were gone. His breath hitched as he scrambled to his feet. The room was eerily quiet, save for the faint creaking of wood under an unseen weight. He turned sharply. The door to the room was ajar, swinging slightly, as though someone had just left. But what sent a chill down his spine was the chair in the center of the room. The mannequin was back. Only this time it wasn't seated. It stood facing the doorway, its head slightly tilted. Its lifeless, painted eyes stared past him, as though it was waiting for something. Ethan swallowed the rising panic and took slow, deliberate steps toward the door. He needed to find the others. He needed to get out. The hallway beyond was narrow, lit only by the dull gray light seeping through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. His footsteps felt too loud, echoing in the emptiness. As he reached the staircase, he heard it, whispers, faint and distant, coming from below. His breath quickened. He descended cautiously, each step creaking under his weight. The whispers grew clearer, morphing into voices. "Ethan, where are you?" It was Olivia's voice. He rushed forward, the whispering now an urgent hum filling his ears. But as he turned the corner into the main room, he skidded to a halt. The sight before him sent ice through his veins. Sarah, Mark, and Olivia stood there, motionless, their backs turned to him. They faced the far wall, their heads slightly bowed, like puppets waiting for their strings to be pulled. The room was thick with an unnatural stillness. "Guys?" Ethan croaked. No response. He took a step closer, reaching out a shaky hand to touch Olivia's shoulder. The moment his fingers brushed against her, her head snapped to the side, far too quickly, far too unnaturally. Her eyes were wide, but they weren't hers anymore. They were hollow, empty. A slow, eerie smile crept across her face as she whispered, "You never left, Ethan." He stumbled back, his heart hammering in his chest. Sarah and Mark turned in unison, their faces mirroring Olivia's unnatural expression. "Come sit with us," Sarah said, her voice layered, as if more than one person was speaking. The shadows in the room stretched unnaturally, creeping toward him. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with something unseen but suffocating. Ethan spun around and ran. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to get away. His feet pounded against the wooden floor, past the kitchen, down a narrow corridor, and through a door that led into the open street of Ravenshade. Except, it wasn't the same Ravenshade they had entered the night before. The village had changed. The fog was thicker, swirling unnaturally, hiding what lay beyond. The buildings seemed distorted, their angles wrong, their windows dark voids that seemed to watch him. A flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned sharply. At the far end of the street, just barely visible through the haze, stood a figure. Not the mannequin, something else. Tall, shadowed, unmoving, watching. A low hum filled the air, and as it grew louder, Ethan realized it wasn't just sound, it was words, whispered in a language he didn't understand but instinctively feared. He turned to run, but a cold hand clamped onto his wrist. He gasped and spun around. Olivia was there, her eyes still hollow, her grip impossibly strong, her head tilted slightly, her lips parting just enough to let out a single whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Darkness swallowed him whole.